Hello. I didn't know if we were starting yet or not because the music stopped, but it was still dark. Okay, before we get into the message, I feel like it's important to acknowledge that there was a certain person in this room who totally crushed the game. Absolutely annihilated it, got almost all of the answers. Where did she go? Where'd Piper go? Right about now. What if we just chant for her? Will she come back? Everyone chant with me. Ready? Piper, 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 Piper. Maybe she went to the bathroom. Well, we were going to give her the belt. Maybe she somehow found out about that and didn't want to go up on stage. That's fine. All right. First, I wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite chocolate candy bar? Raise your hand and tell me. I heard Kit Kat. Nash. Twix? Milky Way. That's where it's at. Thank you for saying that. Jason, did you hear that? We got a Milky Way. Oh, look. I see a certain someone. Piper, we were going to give you a prize because you did so well in the game. Come on up on stage. Are we doing the full thing or nah? Okay, we're doing the full thing. You just wait. Belts in one night, but the reason Piper didn't win is because we had a brand new friend that was brought, but Piper, you absolutely crushed the game, so we just had to recognize your awesomeness in that. Okay, any other ones have some chocolate candy bars they want to tell me about? What's your favorite? Jack?
Hershey.
What? Hershey's. I thought you said Mercy. I was like, I haven't heard of that one. Yes? Heath? Okay, good one. Look, okay. 100 grand? Snickers? Either Heath or Crunch. Okay, a lot of good answers. My two favorites, or my three favorites? I can't remember which order. Yeah, my top three favorites were all mentioned. For me, it is number one is Milky Way, and I've been judged for it being there, but some people agree with me, so that's good. My number two would be Kit Kat, and my number three would be Twix. However, I gotta be honest, sometimes Kit Kat makes its way up to my number one because of how good it is. Sharing is caring. Now, let me tell you, the thing I love about Kit Kats. What? What is it? What's the problem? I'm so sorry. Are you guys bothered by the fact that I didn't eat that the right way? Bothered that I didn't use that for its intended purpose? Yes, Jack? That's very extra. Okay, I'm going to bring us back in before we all totally lose it, because there was some outrage from the Kit Kat. Okay, guys. Perfect. Some of you got a little bothered, by the way. I took a bite of that Kit Kat, which was exactly my intention, so you're welcome. In this I ruined it, he says. I did ruin it. I didn't use that thing, the Kit Kat, for its intended purpose. It was created for a specific way and to be eaten a certain way and all these things, and I went outside of what it was meant to be, outside of its intended purpose. There are things in life that happen often, times where things aren't used for their intended purpose. Or even worse than that, they aren't used for any purpose at all, even though they have one. When these things happen, it can be bothersome. It can be frustrating. It can be upsetting, just like how upset all of you guys got just now. If you were here last week, or if you can read the words in the background on the screen, you would gather that we've been talking about purpose in this series. So in me talking about this, relating it to the Kit Kat, some of you might be like, I see where you're going and where we're going to jump in tonight. Before we do, I would like to pray. But the room has to be quiet to pray, so let's do that. God, thank you for this time that we've had to gather here tonight. I thank you for all of the moments that led up to now. I pray that you would help us to lean into this current moment and what it is that you have for us. I pray that you would help me as I speak, help me to say what it is the students need to hear, and that we would all walk away feeling closer to you and challenged in how we can grow. I pray this in your name. Amen. All right. So, last week, is there going to be a lot of talking at this table the whole night? Because if so, I might have to split you guys up to a different table. I'll give you another chance, but just, I've already talked to you guys multiple times about being quiet, so you've already had the 3 chances. You guys are fine for now. If I have to quiet you guys down again, I'm going to make you move, just so you know. Last week, we met Esther, and we learned some of her story. And I mentioned how I want each of you guys to read the book of Esther because it is so good. There are so many good things within it that we simply do not have the time to get to because we're only talking about her for 2 weeks. We talked about her last week, we're talking about her this week, and then that's it. Next week, we're moving on to Christmas, and then other stuff after that. So you should read the book of Esther. In case you weren't here last week, this is your real quick recap, or maybe you just forgot what we talked about last week. This is your real quick recap of where we are today in Esther's story. Esther is this woman who was brought to the castle because there was a proclamation put out that the king needed a new queen. So she was brought to the castle to see if she would be fit to be a queen. The king found favor in her, and so she ended up being the one who was made queen. Now, Esther had this cousin named Mordecai who had some sort of conflict with this dude named Haman. And after this happened, Haman declared that he wanted all of Mordecai's people, which is the Jewish people, to be killed. Now, Esther and Mordecai are cousins, so Esther is also a Jew. However, the people at the palace and the king don't know this. So where we left off last week was we saw that Mordecai had found out about this proclamation that had been put out that all of the Jews should be killed, and then he started talking to Esther about it. So we'll go back to a couple verses from last week just to help remember where we're at, and then we'll see what Esther has to say in response. So, going to the first verse, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. So, little clarification that I forgot to give. When she found out that the order had been put out for all of the Jews to be killed, Mordecai said to her, you have to go to the king. You have to talk to him and plead with him that this horrible thing doesn't happen. However, she was concerned because at this point, the law was if you show up in the king's presence unannounced, you would be killed. That is, unless he chose to spare your life. But it had been over a month since she was summoned to go to the king, so she was like, I don't really know that he would choose to spare my life. He might be angry that I just show up unannounced, and according to the law, I might be put to death. I can't do that. So that's what she says to Mordecai, and then he sends back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? So here was where Mordecai was challenging Esther. He was saying, if you choose not to do anything about this, don't think that you're going to be the only one that makes it out safe. They're going to find out that you're a Jew. They're going to kill you because that's the law, and you and your father's family are going to perish. He has faith that there will be deliverance for the Jews because the Jews are God's people. He knows that God would deliver these people so that they wouldn't go extinct, but there would still be death and destruction and grief and all of these things. So he says, what if you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? This is where we find that idea that God placed Esther into this specific moment for a purpose. And we talked about how God has placed each and every one of us in this specific moment for a purpose. Now we get to see what Esther has to say in response to Mordecai. So if we go to the next verses, then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. We see that at this point, Esther realized what it is she had to do. And she feels that calling of, this is what I need to do. So she says she's going to fast. She encourages Mordecai and all the other Jews to fast as well and to pray for this thing that is about to happen. And then she says, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Esther was presented with a dilemma here, because if she were to show up in the king's presence unannounced, there's a chance that she could be killed. But then if she were to not go talk to the king, they would eventually find out that she was a Jew, and she would be killed. But then also all of her people would be killed. So she's facing what looks like death in either option. But she considers the fact that if I don't risk my own life, all of the lives of my family and my people and the people I love are also going to be gone. So she made her choice, and she made it boldly. She said, if I perish, I perish. Just like a casual thing. If this happens, it happens. No, there was so much boldness and confidence in that. She was so confident in the fact that this is what she needed to do, that she was like, if death is what comes as a result of this, then death is what comes. But I can rest knowing that I did the thing that God told me I needed to do. Now, some of you may be wondering what happened in Esther's story. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. And because I challenged you to read it, I'm not going to tell you. Instead, I'm going to tell you to read it for yourself. You only have to read chapters 5, 6, and 7, and they're short. But I'm going to challenge you, go home, either do it tonight or do it at some point this week, read Esther 5, 6, and 7, and see how that story lives out. There is one thing that I will say that's kind of a spoiler, but not too big of a spoiler. What you will see in this story, okay, I'm going to have you guys separate tables. There's too many people at this table. There's too much talking. Like 5 of you go over here. Perfect. Thank you. I will say that in what we've read of Esther's story so far, and in what you guys will read when you go home, you will see that Esther boldly lived out her purpose. In these moments that we read together, and in the moments that you guys would read if you were to go home and read this on your own, you would see that she took every step with boldness and confidence, knowing this was what she was here for, this was what she had to do. If you want to take after Esther, you must boldly live out your purpose. If no one's ever told you before, you have a purpose. Like, you do. I know that for 100% sure. That's not debatable. But I know I used to wonder about purpose a lot when I was around your guys' age. In fact, so often I thought that I didn't really have a purpose because I just got so caught up in wondering what it was. And then I was like, well, if I can't think of what it is, then I must not have one. That ended up not being the case. I thought that there's a lot of talking in the hallway, too. Man, we're just having a talkative night. Hey, people in the hallway, stop. Thanks, Xander, for the backup. Xander's my echo tonight, I guess. Okay, anywho, when I was younger, I used to wonder about my purpose a lot, and I didn't think I had one. I often thought that I was useless. I had to realize that that was not true, and I had to instead replace it with the things that were true. To realize what this truth was, I need to provide an analogy to help this make sense in all of our brains. How many of you have something like tucked away in the corner of your closet or under your bed or in your attic or something that you literally never touch? Never touch, never use, nothing. Yeah, like literally all of us. It's not that that thing you have is useless. It's just that you are treating it that way. You aren't choosing to use it. I had to realize that I was being that same way. It's not that I was useless, it's that I wasn't allowing myself to be used. I was so caught up in, what is my purpose? I don't know what my purpose is, that I didn't take steps to find it out and to act it out and to live it out. We have to allow ourselves to be used, to find that purpose. And when we find that purpose, we have to boldly live out our purpose. But what does that look like? What does it look like to boldly live out our purpose? Firstly, you have to recognize your purpose. And this would make sense. You can't live something out until you know what it is that you're supposed to live out. And so I talked a little bit last week about what it looks like to try and find our purpose or recognize our purpose and all these things. So if you are in a place where you don't really know what your purpose is, I would encourage you to watch last week. However, there are a couple more things that I want to say tonight to help us realize what our purpose could be. There are 3 questions that I want you guys to ask yourself to discover your purpose. Whether you feel good about knowing what your purpose is or you don't, ask yourself these 3 questions right now. First question, what gets you fired up? What is it that when someone's talking to you about something, you get super excited and you're super amped and you're like, oh gosh, I can't wait to talk about this. That could be something that's pointing to your purpose. If it's something that excites you, if it's something you're passionate about, something you're willing to defend, that could be a part of your purpose. Do you have something to say, Dexter? The Kit Kat, very much so, yes. The second question, what breaks your heart? And hearing this, some of you boys might immediately tune me out. Don't do that. You all have hearts, and they can get broken, so don't say that you don't. Also, in hearing this, some of you guys might be like, heartbreak? That's what they talk about in like romance and all of that stuff. I'm not talking about that either. Guys, this is not a time for talking to each other. When you see something in the world, there are times where it causes you pain. To see when people are being mistreated, to see when someone is going through a difficult time, to see all of these different things. Those kind of things are the things that break your heart. So what is it that breaks your heart? Because if it is causing that level of hurt within you, that means that you care deeply about that thing. Again, meaning it could be a part of your purpose. Then the last question is, what are you naturally good at? Now, I'm going to say this. You guys are naturally good at things. So, very much so. So often we sell ourselves short. We're just like, I'm not naturally good at anything. I don't really have any strengths. And we're so hard on ourselves. That is not true. I know for a fact that each and every one of you have things you're naturally good at. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It doesn't have to be, I'm naturally good at playing guitar. I'm naturally good at all this stuff. For me, I'm naturally good at your mom jokes. That's just one of the ways God has gifted me, and that's okay. But when I ask myself all 3 of these questions, what gets me fired up, what breaks my heart, and what am I naturally good at, all of it leads me to student ministry, which is why I'm here now. What gets me fired up? So many people don't recognize how awesome you guys are as a generation. Like, genuinely, you are some awesome people, and I know that you guys have so much potential, and you are going to make a huge impact and difference in the world. And so many people that are so caught in the ways of how they used to do, you're like, these Gen Zers and Gen Alphas are just ruining everything, and all they do is scroll on their phones. That's not true. And when I hear people talking about you guys that way, it gets me fired up, because I'm like, no, they're amazing. Don't treat them as not amazing, because they are, and I know that you guys will go on to do amazing things. What breaks my heart? When I see people talking badly about you, or when I see you guys are struggling in school, or when I see you're struggling with friendships, or when I see that whatever it is that's going on in your life, those things break my heart. What am I naturally good at? I'm naturally good at your mom jokes. I'm good at humor. I'm good at all these things, which all of this leads me to student ministry, which is why I'm here now. I'm living out one of the purposes that God has created me to. When you ask yourself these 3 questions, they can lead you to your unique purpose. And I say your unique purpose because all of us have unique purposes, and then all of us have purposes that we are all called to. As believers, there are certain things that God has called each and every one of us to. Some of those things are telling others about Jesus, being a light to this world, serving one another, holding fellow believers accountable, and so much more. Those are things that each and every believer is called to. But there are also things that you are uniquely called to because God created you uniquely for a specific purpose. In talking about living out our purpose, there's something I want to challenge you guys to. And you may have heard this statement before because I feel like it's pretty common. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. See a need, meet a need. This is very simple. When you look around, what needs do you see in the world around you? And what can you do to meet them? Here are some examples. Maybe you see an old lady at the grocery store and she's struggling to put her bags into her car. You could walk up and say, hey, would it be okay if I help you load your car? Maybe when you're at home and you have a dirty plate and you open the dishwasher and you see that it's full and clean, what we normally do is we just go, oh, and we just slowly close the door and then we put our plate in the sink and walk away. What you could instead do is see the need that is there. The dishwasher needs to be emptied, so I'm going to do that. And then what I'm also going to do is take my plate out of the sink and put it in the dishwasher, seeing multiple needs and meeting multiple needs. Maybe seeing a need and meeting a need looks like checking in on your friend who you know is going through a difficult time. Some of you may think that this sounds tiring, like the idea of constantly looking around and seeing what needs there are around you and taking steps to make them better. And I'll be honest, there could be some times where it is. But ultimately, if this is something that you continue to do, it is going to end up being so much more fulfilling than if you were to not look at those things and just be focused on yourself and your own needs. Another thing is, if it doesn't end up being more fulfilling, that could be a sign that maybe your heart isn't in the right place. Because we were created to serve others, not to be served. That's what God calls us to. However, so often in our sin nature, we get that flipped. We want to be served. We don't want to have to serve others or take care of others. We want them to serve us and to take care of us. Our heart is in the wrong place, which means that when we do serve, it's not fulfilling because we're like, no, I would rather be served. You have to work on your heart and instead be willing to serve others, to see their needs, to meet their needs, and make a difference in their life. And when you see that difference that you're making in all of the people around you, you'll see that fulfillment that will come with it. Here's something super important. To see a need, you have to be looking for it. Sometimes we're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do what it is God calls me to do, and I'm going to do what I can to meet the needs of the people around me, and then we put on our blinders, and we only focus on us and what's going on in our life, and we don't see all of the situations that God has placed around us, all of those situations that He wants for us to step into, but we're choosing not to step into them because we're choosing not to see them. To see those needs, you have to look for them. So here's what I want to challenge you to this week. Look around. See the needs that are around you. And think about, what could you do to help those people? What could you do to help those situations? What could you do in all of these things to meet those needs? Part of looking around will also be seeing your strengths. This is something I talked about last week. Each and every one of you have unique strengths that God gifted you with because He has a unique purpose for you. So look around, see the strengths that He's given you. See the things that break your heart. Again, asking those 3 questions that I mentioned. What is it that breaks your heart? See those things, and then aim to do something about it. When there's something that breaks your heart, your goal should be to do something about it, to see a change, to make a difference. See those ways that you can make a difference. After you look around, meet needs. There are so many needs out there. There are people who need Jesus. There are people who need love. There are people who need support. There are circumstances that need support, or they need help, or they need service, or whatever it is. This is a great way that you can fulfill your purpose and bring value to the things that you're involved in. There is so much good that comes out of when we're aiming to bring value to the people around us, or the places around us, or the things around us, or all of these things. Each and every one of you can make a difference in this world. And sometimes when we talk about that, we get caught up in like the big world, like the big picture, the whole earth, and we're like, I can't make a difference in the world. I'm not saying you're going to change the whole entire world. However, I do know that you can make a difference in the pieces of the world that you touch. But you have to view it that way, and you have to be bold about it, which is my last point. Be bold. So when you see that lady at the grocery store that's struggling to put her bags in her car, don't be afraid to walk up to her and say, hey, can I ask you for help? Or can I ask you for help? Can I help you? I know that some of you guys, when I mentioned that example, immediately were like, I would never do that. Walk up to a stranger I don't know and ask if I can help them? Be bold. Esther was willing to die for the purpose that God has called her to. Why would we ever let anything like fear or embarrassment or anything like that hold us back from what it is that God wants us to accomplish? Each and every one of you have a purpose. You have the many purposes that God has called all of us to. You also have many purposes that He has called you to uniquely, because you are a unique person who He designed for a unique purpose. My challenge for you is to boldly live out your purpose. Boldly live out that calling that He's given you. Whether you know what it is right now or not, I know that there will be one day where God shows you some of the purposes that He has for you. And when you see those things, I want you to take them, I want you to run with them, and I want you to boldly live them out. Let's pray. God, I thank you again for this time that we have tonight and just the fact that we got to hear a little bit from your word and about our purposes and what it means to live them out. I pray that you would help each one of us to be bold. So often we get caught up in the things of this world like fear or embarrassment or what are others going to think or I don't feel like I can make a difference or I'm too insecure or whatever it is. I pray that all of those things that try and hold us back would just be gone. I pray that they would have no power over us, that we would be so focused on living out the purpose that you have for us to the point where those things don't even affect us. They don't even bother us because we just want to accomplish what it was that you have for us. I pray that we would be like Esther. I pray that we would be so bold and confident in our calling that we are willing to follow it no matter what. I know you're capable of equipping us with this boldness, so I pray that you would. And I pray that we would step up and we would take it because it requires action on our part. And so I ask that each and every one of us would do what we need to make that happen. I pray this in your name. Amen.